The dark and thunderous sky mirrored Daisy Mitchell's mood as she stormed into her brother's penthouse apartment without knocking. "Nathan, I swear to God, if you try to set me up on another blind date, I will personally ensure your next business deal falls through," she announced, dropping her umbrella in the marble entryway where it formed a small puddle. Nathan Sullivan looked up from his laptop with the unflappable calm of someone who had built a shipping empire from scratch. At 34, he had the kind of wealth most people only dreamed about, and unfortunately for Daisy, the kind of protective streak that drove her absolutely insane. "Hello to you too, little sister," he replied, closing his computer. "And for the record, your threats about my business deals stopped working when we were teenagers." Daisy slumped onto his pristine white couch, not caring that her rain-dampened clothes might leave marks. "I found the reservation confirmation for Oriole in my email. Friday at 8 p.m. Care to explain?" Nathan had the decency to look slightly guilty. "You need to get out more, meet people, have some fun." "I have plenty of fun," Daisy protested, though even she could hear the hollow note in her voice. At 28, she had built a respectable career as a museum curator, surrounded by beautiful artifacts all day, but her personal life had become something of an artifact itself, preserved but not living. "When was the last time you went on a date?" Nathan challenged. Daisy opened her mouth to answer, then closed it. The silence was damning. "Exactly," Nathan said, his voice softening. "Look, he's a great guy, Daniel Mercer. He's new in town, just moved here to head the restoration project at the Harrison Building. He's intelligent, well-traveled, not intimidated by strong women, and I don't care if he's the reincarnation of Michelangelo with abs of marble," Daisy interrupted. "I'm not interested in being set up." Nathan sighed and moved to sit beside her. "Daisy, it's been 2 years since Tom." "Not everyone is going to break your heart and leave town without so much as a goodbye." The mention of her ex-fiancé made Daisy wince. "This isn't about Tom." "Then what is it about? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks a lot like you're hiding." Daisy looked away, hating that her big brother could still read her so well. "I'm not hiding, I'm just selective. So selective that you haven't gone on a date in over a year. Come on, Deus, one dinner. If it's terrible, I'll never try to set you up again." She raised an eyebrow. "Never." "That's a pretty big promise." "I'm that confident," Nathan said with a smile that had charmed investors out of millions. Daisy groaned, knowing she was being maneuvered. "Fine, one dinner. But when it inevitably crashes and burns, I expect a very expensive I'm sorry gift." Nathan grinned. "Deal." 3 days later, Daisy found herself sitting in the elegant bar area of Oriole, nervously smoothing the fabric of her navy blue dress. She had arrived 15 minutes early, a habit she couldn't break, and was now regretting it as her anxiety had time to build. What was she even doing here? She didn't know this Daniel person, and despite Nathan's assurances, blind dates were almost universally awkward. Still, a promise was a promise, and she'd sit through one drink before making her excuses. Daisy checked her watch. 5 minutes until 8. She pulled out her compact mirror, checking her makeup one last time. The soft lighting in the bar was flattering, casting a warm glow that made her auburn hair look almost copper. "Excuse me," a deep voice said from behind her. "Is this seat taken?" Daisy turned, prepared to explain that she was waiting for someone, but the words died in her throat. The man standing there was tall, easily over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and dark hair that curled slightly at the ends. His eyes, an unusual shade of gray-green, crinkled slightly at the corners as if he smiled often. Daisy stumbled over her words, something that rarely happened to her. "I'm actually waiting for someone. A blind date." The man's smile widened. "Daisy Mitchell, I'm Nick Sullivan." I believe I'm your blind date, Daisy blinked. Sullivan. As in, Nathan's my brother, yes, Nick confirmed, sliding onto the bar stool beside her. Though technically he's my half-brother, same father, different mothers. Daisy's mind whirled. Nathan had a half-brother. How had she never known this? But he told me I was meeting Daniel Mercer. Nick laughed, a rich sound that somehow cut through the ambient noise of the restaurant. That would be my business partner. I'm guessing Nathan thought you might refuse if you knew you were being set up with his brother. Half-brother, Daisy corrected automatically, then blushed. Sorry, that was rude. Not at all. It's an important distinction. Nathan and I didn't grow up together. We only connected a few years ago. Nick signaled to the bartender. I'd offer to leave if you're uncomfortable with this arrangement. But honestly, I've heard so much about you that I'd be disappointed not to at least share one drink. Daisy studied him, taking in the expensive but understated watch on his wrist, the tailored fit of his charcoal suit, and the genuine warmth in his eyes. There was something about him that seemed both familiar and entirely new, like a favorite song being covered by a different artist. I think I can manage one drink, she decided, surprised by her own response. Nick's smile was dazzling. Excellent. What are you having? Before Daisy could answer, her phone buzzed with a text. She glanced down to see a message from Nathan. Sorry for the bait and switch. Nick's a good guy. Give him a chance. P.S. You can thank me at your wedding. Daisy nearly choked, quickly turning her phone face down. I'll have a gin and tonic, she told Nick, deciding that she definitely needed that drink now. Good choice, Nick said, ordering the same for himself. So, Nathan tells me you're a curator at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. That must be fascinating. It is, Daisy agreed, relaxing slightly as they moved to safe, professional territory. I specialize in Renaissance art, but I've been working on a mixed-period exhibition for the past year that's finally opening next month. Renaissance art, that explains the name, Nick commented. Daisy tilted her head. What do you mean, Daisy? As in Marguerite. There's a famous Renaissance portrait, the Marguerite de Valois by Francois Clouet, Daisy finished, genuinely surprised. Most people don't make that connection. Nick shrugged, accepting his drink from the bartender with a nod of thanks. My mother was an art history professor. Some of it was bound to rub off. Their drinks arrived, and Daisy took a sip, studying Nick over the rim of her glass. He wasn't at all what she'd expected. For one thing, he didn't seem to have the same polished, somewhat calculating edge that Nathan had. There was something more. Grounded about him. And what about you? She asked. Nathan mentioned something about a restoration project. Nick nodded. The Harrison Building downtown. It's one of those grand old Beaux Arts structures that's been neglected for decades. My company specializes in historical restorations. That's incredible, Daisy said, genuine interest coloring her voice. The Harrison has amazing architectural details. Those gargoyles on the 32nd floor are particularly striking. Nick's eyes widened slightly. You know the building. I wrote my master's thesis on the integration of mythological elements in early 20th century New York architecture, Daisy explained. The Harrison was one of my case studies. A slow smile spread across Nick's face. I think I may need to hire you as a consultant. I don't come cheap, Daisy warned, surprising herself with the flirtatious tone that had crept into her voice. Neither do I, Nick returned without missing a beat. Their eyes locked, and Daisy felt a flutter in her stomach that had nothing to do with the gin. There was something disarming about the way he looked at her, as if he was actually seeing her, not just the polished surface she usually presented on dates. The bartender approached with a polite cough. Your table is ready whenever you are. Daisy suddenly realized that she'd been so engrossed in their conversation that she hadn't even noticed the passing time. She glanced at her watch. Nearly 20 minutes had gone by. "Shall we?" Nick asked, standing and offering his hand. Daisy hesitated for only a moment before taking it. His palm was warm and slightly rough, the hands of someone who didn't just sit behind a desk all day. "I should warn you," she said as they followed the host to their table. "I came here planning to have one drink and then leave with some excuse about an early meeting." Nick's laugh was unexpected and genuine. "And now," Daisy found herself smiling back, "now I think I might stay for dinner after all." Their table was tucked into a quiet corner with a view of the city lights through floor-to-ceiling windows. Rain had started to fall again, turning the streetlights into blurred halos and adding a cozy intimacy to their setting. "So," Nick said as they settled in, "tell me something Nathan doesn't know about you." Daisy raised an eyebrow. "That's an unusual first date question." "I figure we can skip some of the usual first date formalities, given that I've already heard the standard biography from my brother." Daisy considered this as she unfolded her napkin. "Fair point. Let's see. Something Nathan doesn't know." She thought for a moment. "I have a small tattoo of a compass rose on my ankle that I got when I was 19. Nathan would have a conniption if he knew." Nick's eyes crinkled with amusement. "Your secret is safe with me. Any particular reason for a compass rose?" "I was going through a phase where I felt a bit lost," Daisy admitted. "It was my reminder that I could always find my way." Nick nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I like that." "Your turn," Daisy prompted. "Tell me something Nathan doesn't know about you." Nick leaned back in his chair, considering. "I lived in a Buddhist monastery in Nepal for 6 months after college." Daisy's eyes widened. "Really? That's unexpected." "I was going through my own lost phase," Nick explained. "I had just received a substantial inheritance from my mother's side of the family, and suddenly everyone wanted something from me. I needed to clear my head, figure out what I actually wanted from life." "And did you figure it out, I mean?" Nick's gaze turned reflective. "Partly. I learned that I wanted to build something meaningful, not just live off family money. That's when I started the restoration company. There's something powerful about taking something beautiful that's been neglected and bringing it back to life." The passion in his voice was captivating, and Daisy found herself leaning forward, drawn in. "That's how I feel about the pieces I work with at the museum. Each artifact has a story, a history that deserves to be preserved and shared." "Exactly," Nick said, his eyes lighting up with shared understanding. "It's about honoring what came before while making sure it has a future." Their waiter approached, and they paused to order a moment that should have broken the flow of their conversation but somehow didn't. As soon as he left, they fell right back into their discussion, moving from restoration philosophy to favorite travel destinations to embarrassing childhood stories. By the time their entrees arrived, Daisy had almost forgotten this was a blind date. Talking with Nick felt surprisingly natural, as if they'd known each other for years instead of hours. He truly listened when she spoke, asking thoughtful follow-up questions and sharing his own perspectives without dominating the conversation. "So, how did you and Nathan connect?" Daisy asked as she savored a bite of her perfectly prepared sea bass. "If you don't mind my asking." Nick set down his fork. "Not at all. It's actually a bit of a strange story. I knew who he was. Our father wasn't exactly subtle about having another family, but I never had any interest in reaching out. Then about 5 years ago, I was working on restoring a historic theater in Boston, and Nathan's company was handling the shipping for some specialized materials we needed from Italy." "Let me guess," Daisy said. "The Sullivan shipping company messed up your order, and you called to complain." Nick laughed. "Close. They actually saved the project. There was a dock strike in Genoa that would have delayed our shipment by months, but Nathan personally arranged for an alternative route through Slovenia at no extra cost. I called to thank him, and somehow during that conversation, it came up that we shared a father. That must have been awkward. Incredibly, Nick agreed. There was this long silence, and then he just said we should get a drink sometime. 6 months later, I moved my company headquarters to New York. Daisy tilted her head. Just like that. You uprooted your entire life based on one conversation. Nick's expression turned more serious. Not entirely. I'd been thinking about expanding to New York anyway. The restoration opportunities here are incredible. But yes, meeting Nathan was a factor. I lost my mother when I was in college, and I never had much of a relationship with our father. The idea of having family again, it mattered. The vulnerability in his admission touched Daisy. Most of the men she'd dated in recent years had been so concerned with projecting strength and success that they rarely showed any real emotion. Nathan never told me any of this, she said softly. He's usually so private about family matters. He mentioned that it took him a while to tell you about me, Nick acknowledged. I think he wanted to make sure we had a real relationship before bringing me into his inner circle. You're important to him. He's important to me too, even when he's being an insufferable, overprotective pain in my neck, Daisy said with a fond smile. Though after tonight, I might have to revise my opinion of his matchmaking skills. As soon as the words left her mouth, Daisy felt her cheeks warm. She hadn't meant to be quite so direct. Nick's eyes met hers, and the intensity in them made her breath catch. I'm glad to hear that, he said quietly, because I'm having a much better time than I expected. The air between them seemed to thicken with possibility. Daisy was suddenly acutely aware of every detail: the soft jazz playing in the background, the gentle clink of silverware, the way the candlelight caught the angles of Nick's face. Me too, she admitted, surprised by her own honesty. Their dessert arrived, a dark chocolate soufflé to share, creating a momentary reprieve from the growing tension. Daisy was grateful for the distraction, using the moment to collect herself. What was happening here? She had come prepared to endure an awkward evening, not to find herself genuinely attracted to her brother's half-brother. May I? Nick asked, gesturing to the soufflé. Daisy nodded, watching as he broke through the delicate crust with a spoon, releasing a cloud of steam. He offered the first bite to her, and she leaned forward to accept it, the rich chocolate melting on her tongue. Good, he asked, his voice dropping slightly lower. She confirmed, unable to articulate a more coherent response. Nick took his own bite, closing his eyes briefly in appreciation. Remarkable. They finished the dessert in companionable silence, occasionally catching each other's eye and sharing small smiles. When the waiter brought the check, Nick reached for it immediately. Please let me, he said. Consider it thanks for giving this blind date a chance despite your reservations. How do you know I had reservations? Daisy challenged. Nick's smile was knowing. Nathan mentioned you threatened bodily harm if he tried to set you up again. Daisy laughed. Close enough. But I insist on leaving the tip, at least. Deal, Nick agreed. As they left the restaurant, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening under the city lights. The air was cool and fresh, carrying that distinctive after-rain smell that momentarily cut through the usual city odors. Can I walk you home? Nick asked, standing close enough that Daisy could catch the subtle scent of his cologne, something with notes of cedar and bergamot. I live in the village, she said. It's a bit of a hike from here. I don't mind, he replied, unless you'd prefer a cab. Daisy considered the offer. A walk would extend their evening, and she was surprised to find that she wasn't ready for it to end yet. A walk sounds nice, actually. They set off down the avenue, their pace unhurried. New York at night had a different energy, still vibrant, but somehow more intimate than the daytime hustle. Street vendors were packing up, late-night workers were heading home, and couples like them were emerging from restaurants and theaters. Couples like them. The thought made Daisy pause internally. Were they a couple? No, of course not. They just met. But there was undeniably something between them, a connection she hadn't felt in a long time. "Penny for your thoughts?" Nick asked, glancing down at her. Daisy smiled. "I was just thinking about how unexpected tonight was. In a good way, I hope, definitely in a good way." She hesitated, then added, "I should probably thank Nathan, though it pains me to admit it." Nick laughed. "Your secret's safe with me. We can let him sweat it out a bit longer." They crossed through Washington Square Park, the arch illuminated against the night sky. A street musician was playing saxophone near the fountain, the mournful notes floating on the night air. "Dance with me?" Nick asked suddenly, holding out his hand. Daisy blinked. "Here, now? Why not?" His spontaneity was infectious. With a laugh, Daisy placed her hand in his. Nick drew her close, one hand resting lightly on her lower back as they began to sway to the music. They weren't the only impromptu dancers in the park, but Daisy felt as if they were alone in their own private moment. "I have a confession to make," Nick said, his voice low near her ear. "What's that?" Daisy asked, suddenly nervous. "I asked Nathan to introduce us months ago after I saw you at his Christmas party. You were explaining the symbolism in some painting to a group of completely enraptured executives, and I couldn't take my eyes off you." Daisy pulled back slightly to look at him. "You were at the Christmas party. I don't remember seeing you." "I arrived late and had to leave early for an emergency at one of our job sites. Nathan introduced us very briefly, but you were deep in conversation with the museum director, and I don't think you even registered my presence." "And yet you remembered me," Daisy said softly. Nick's hand tightened slightly on her back. "Some people are hard to forget." The saxophone player transitioned into a slower, more soulful melody. Daisy let herself move closer to Nick, her head resting against his chest. She could hear his heartbeat, steady and strong. "Another confession," Nick murmured. "I've never done anything like this before. Danced in a park, asked my brother to set me up with someone, gone on a blind date, felt this kind of immediate connection." Daisy's own heart quickened. "I know what you mean. This isn't normal for me either." They continued to dance as the song wound down, neither in a hurry to break apart. When the music finally ended, Nick stepped back but kept hold of her hand. "We should probably continue walking before we become a permanent park fixture," he suggested with a smile. They resumed their journey, crossing through the rest of the park and onto the quieter streets of the village. Daisy pointed out her favorite bookstore, a tiny cafe that made the best croissants in the city, and finally, her building a pre-war brownstone with a small, well-maintained garden out front. "This is me," she said, stopping at the entrance. The moment felt weighted with possibility, like standing on the edge of a diving board. "Thank you for tonight," Nick said, still holding her hand. "I'd like to see you again if you're open to that." Daisy looked up at him, taking in the earnestness in his expression. There were 100 reasons to be cautious. He was her brother's half-brother. They'd just met. Her last relationship had ended so badly. And yet, "I'd like that too," she said. Nick's smile was worth any risk. He leaned down slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away if she wanted to. But Daisy found herself rising up on her toes instead, meeting him halfway. The kiss was gentle at first, a question more than a demand. But when Daisy responded, it deepened, becoming something more profound. His hand came up to cradle her face, thumb brushing gently over her cheekbone. When they finally parted, Daisy felt slightly dazed. "Wow," she breathed. Nick chuckled, the sound vibrating through her where they were still pressed together. My thoughts exactly. Reluctantly, they stepped apart. I'll call you tomorrow, Nick asked. Daisy nodded, unable to keep the smile from her face. I'd like that. With one more quick kiss, Nick waited for her to unlock the door and step inside before he turned to leave. Daisy watched through the glass panel as he walked away, his figure gradually disappearing into the night. As she climbed the stairs to her apartment, Daisy's phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. So, do I need to prepare for a "you were right" speech or a "never interfere in my life again" lecture? Daisy laughed and typed back. I'm still deciding, but your gift budget just went way up either way. She put her phone away, kicked off her heels and flopped onto her couch, replaying the evening in her mind. For the first time in years, Daisy felt a flutter of something she'd almost forgotten: hope, and it had arrived before the drinks had even been served. The next morning, Daisy woke to sunlight streaming through her bedroom window and the memory of last night's unexpected connection washing over her. She stretched, a smile forming before she was even fully awake. Had it really happened? That instant chemistry, the easy conversation, the dance in Washington Square Park. Her phone chimed with an incoming text. Unknown number. Good morning. I hope it's not too early, but I couldn't wait any longer to message you. Last night was amazing. Would you like to have dinner again tonight? Nick. Daisy's smile widened as she typed back. Not too early at all. I'd love to have dinner tonight. His response came almost immediately. Great. I'll pick you up at 7. I know a place I think you'll love. Looking forward to it, she replied, feeling a giddy anticipation she hadn't experienced in years. Rising from bed with more energy than usual for a Saturday morning, Daisy headed to the kitchen to make coffee. As the rich aroma filled her apartment, her phone rang with her brother's ringtone. Well, Nathan's voice demanded without preamble when she answered. Good morning to you too, Daisy replied, unable to keep the amusement from her voice. Don't play coy, Daisy. How was the date? And before you get mad, I had good reasons for not telling you it was Nick. Daisy sipped her coffee, considering how much to reveal. You mean reasons like knowing I'd refuse to go if I knew you were trying to set me up with your brother, half-brother, Nathan corrected automatically. And yes, precisely. But in my defense, I genuinely thought you two would hit it off. Was I wrong? The hopefulness in his voice made Daisy soften. No, she admitted. You weren't wrong, it was surprisingly good. Surprisingly good. That's the best you can do. Nick texted me at midnight saying it was the best date he's ever been on. Daisy nearly choked on her coffee. He did not. Okay, not in those exact words, Nathan conceded. But he did say he had an incredible time and thanked me for introducing you. A warm feeling spread through Daisy's chest that had nothing to do with the coffee. Well, I suppose I should thank you too, even though your methods were underhanded. You're welcome, Nathan said, and she could hear the smirk in his voice. So, second date. Tonight, actually, Daisy admitted. Nathan's whoop of triumph was so loud that she had to hold the phone away from her ear. I knew it. Where's he taking you? I don't know yet. He said he knows a place he thinks I'll like. Interesting, Nathan mused. Nick doesn't usually frequent the typical upscale dating spots. He's more of a hidden gem kind of guy. Daisy found herself intrigued by this insight. How long have you two been close? You never really talked about him before. Nathan was quiet for a moment. It's been a gradual thing. When we first met, it was awkward as hell. Our father wasn't exactly father of the year to either of us, but at least I had our mother. Nick's mom raised him alone, and from what I gather, it wasn't easy. He mentioned she passed away when he was in college, Daisy said softly. Yeah, cancer. Left him with this restoration company she'd built from nothing and a substantial family inheritance from her side. He could have just sold the business and lived off the money, but instead, he's grown it into one of the most respected historical restoration firms in the country. There was unmistakable pride in Nathan's voice. He's a good man, Daisy, one of the best I know, actually. Coming from Nathan, who was typically sparing with his praise, this was significant. I can see that, Daisy said, but it's still early days. We're just getting to know each other. Of course, Nathan agreed, though his tone suggested he already had them walking down the aisle. Just give him a chance, okay? Not everyone is going to be like Tom. The mention of her ex brought a familiar pang, but surprisingly less sharp than usual. I know that. Good. Call me after date number 2, Daisy rolled her eyes. Goodbye, Nathan. After hanging up, Daisy spent the day in a pleasant haze of anticipation, alternating between practical tasks, laundry, grocery shopping, reviewing some work documents, and less practical ones, like trying on 5 different outfits for that evening. She finally settled on a simple emerald green dress that brought out the gold flecks in her hazel eyes, paired with a delicate gold necklace and ankle boots. Casual enough for most restaurants, but elegant enough for finer establishments. At precisely 7 p.m., her building's intercom buzzed. Daisy pressed the button. Hello, it's Nick. Ready for our adventure. The way he called it, an adventure rather than simply dinner, made her smile. Coming right down. Nick was waiting on the sidewalk, looking devastatingly handsome in dark jeans and a charcoal blazer over a navy button-down shirt. His face lit up when he saw her, making Daisy's heart do a little flip. You look beautiful, he said, leaning in to kiss her cheek. Thank you, she replied, breathing in his now familiar scent. You clean up pretty well yourself. Instead of a taxi waiting at the curb, there was a vintage motorcycle, a restored Triumph Bonneville in gleaming black and chrome. Daisy raised an eyebrow. That's not what I expected. Nick grinned, looking a bit boyish in his excitement. Too much. We can grab a cab if you'd prefer. No, it's perfect, Daisy decided, surprising herself. I've never been on a motorcycle before. Never. Nick looked delighted by this fact. Well then, your first time should be special. He handed her a helmet, not one of those bulky, unflattering ones, but a sleek, retro-styled one that matched the bike. Safety first. After helping her adjust the strap, Nick swung his leg over the motorcycle and held out his hand. Hop on and hold tight. Daisy carefully climbed on behind him, grateful she'd chosen a dress with enough give to allow her to sit comfortably. She wrapped her arms around his waist, immediately aware of the solid warmth of him through his jacket. Ready? He asked over his shoulder. Ready, she confirmed, tightening her grip slightly. The engine roared to life beneath them, a powerful vibration that Daisy could feel throughout her body. Nick eased them into traffic with the confidence of someone who'd been riding for years, and soon they were cruising through the city streets. There was something exhilarating about experiencing New York this way, the buildings blurring past, the wind against her face, the closeness required by their shared seat. Daisy found herself relaxing into Nick's back, enjoying the sensation of movement and the necessity of trust. They headed north, crossing into Harlem and continuing until they reached a neighborhood Daisy recognized as Washington Heights. Nick pulled up in front of an unassuming building with a simple sign reading La Familia. Best Dominican food in the city, Nick explained as he helped Daisy off the bike. The owner, Elena, was one of our first restoration clients. Her family has run this restaurant for 3 generations, but their building was in danger of being condemned until we stepped in. That's amazing, Daisy said, genuinely touched that he'd chosen a place with personal meaning rather than just an impressive price tag. Inside, the restaurant was warm and inviting, with family photos covering the walls and the mouth-watering aroma of spices filling the air. A small woman with silver-streaked black hair immediately rushed over when she spotted Nick. "Nicolas," she exclaimed, enveloping him in a hug despite being a foot shorter. "You finally bring a beautiful woman to my restaurant. I was beginning to worry." Nick laughed, returning the embrace. "Elena, this is Daisy. Daisy, this is Elena Rodriguez, the heart and soul of La Familia." "It's wonderful to meet you," Daisy said warmly. Elena took Daisy's hands in hers, studying her face with keen dark eyes. "Ah, she has kind eyes, Nicolas. Good choice." She turned back to Daisy. "He save our building, you know. When the city want to tear it down, he fight for us, show them how to fix instead of destroy." Daisy glanced at Nick, who looked slightly embarrassed by the praise. "He didn't mention that part." "Of course not," Elena said with a knowing smile. "He never brag." "Come, I have special table for you." She led them through the bustling main dining room to a small, private alcove in the back, where a table for two was set with candles and fresh flowers. Through a nearby window, they could see a small garden strung with fairy lights. "I will bring you my special menu," Elena declared. "No ordering needed." After she bustled away, Daisy turned to Nick. "You saved their building from demolition." Nick shrugged, his expression modest. "The city had condemned it as structurally unsound, but I could see that the basic bones were still good. It just needed someone to advocate for restoration rather than replacement." "That seems to be a theme with you," Daisy observed. "Seeing the value in things others might discard." Nick's eyes met hers, something unreadable flickering in their depths. "I believe most things worth having are worth fighting for, even when maybe especially when others don't see their value." The intensity of his gaze made Daisy's breath catch. Before she could respond, Elena returned with 2 glasses of ruby-colored sangria. "First we drink," she announced. "Then we feast." And feast they did. Course after course of delicious Dominican specialties appeared. Tostones with garlic sauce, slow-cooked pernil, mofongo, habichuelas guisadas, each dish more flavorful than the last. Elena herself explained each one, occasionally stopping to pat Nick's shoulder or ask Daisy questions about her work at the museum. Between bites, Nick and Daisy continued their conversation from the previous night, delving deeper into their passions, their histories, their perspectives on life. Daisy found herself sharing stories she rarely told about the year she spent in Florence studying Renaissance art, the panic attacks she'd had before her first major exhibition, the complicated relationship with her parents, who had never quite understood her choice of career. In turn, Nick opened up about the pressure of taking over his mother's company at 23, his ongoing efforts to connect with the half-siblings he'd never known growing up, and his dream of eventually restoring a small ghost town in Colorado that he'd discovered on a cross-country motorcycle trip. "A whole town?" Daisy asked, fascinated. "It's barely a town anymore, just a cluster of abandoned buildings from a silver mining operation that went bust in the 1890s. But the craftsmanship in those structures, even after decades of neglect." His eyes lit up as he described the ornate woodwork, the hand-forged hardware, the story told in every weathered board and crumbling foundation. "You really see the beauty in what others have forgotten," Daisy said softly. Nick's expression turned thoughtful. "I guess I've always been drawn to things with history, with stories embedded in their very structure. There's something powerful about continuity, about being part of something larger than yourself." "I understand that completely," Daisy said. "It's how I feel when I'm working with artifacts that have passed through countless hands across centuries. They connect us to something greater." They fell silent for a moment, the understanding between them deeper than words could express. Alina chose that moment to bring out dessert, a rich bread pudding drizzled with caramel sauce. "For sharing," she said with a wink before disappearing again. Nick offered Daisy the first bite from his spoon, an echo of their chocolate soufflé from the previous night. The gesture felt both familiar and new, a ritual already developing between them. "I have a confession," Daisy said after savoring the sweet, cinnamon-laced bite. "I Googled you this morning." Nick's eyebrows rose in amusement. "And what did you discover in your research?" "That Sullivan Historical Restorations is a bit of an understatement for what you do. Your company has restored some of the most significant historical buildings on the East Coast. That theater in Boston you mentioned, the Athenaeum, that project won national recognition." Nick looked slightly uncomfortable with her praise. "We have a good team." "A team you built," Daisy pointed out. "Also, I may have found that TED talk you gave on the ethics of historical preservation and urban renewal very impressive." Now Nick actually blushed, the color rising along his cheekbones. "I was terrified during that entire presentation. Give me a building to scale any day over public speaking." "You couldn't tell," Daisy assured him. "You were eloquent and passionate." "Speaking of passion," Nick said, clearly ready to change the subject, "Alina mentioned you work at the Met. What's your favorite piece in the collection?" Daisy recognized the deflection but allowed it, launching into a description of a lesser-known Botticelli that had captivated her since graduate school. Nick listened attentively, asking intelligent questions that revealed his own knowledge of art history. By the time they finished their dessert and coffee, the restaurant had emptied considerably. Alina brought over 2 small glasses of homemade mamajuana, a Dominican spiced rum. "For good luck," she said, with a meaningful glance between them. After they'd paid the bill, Nick insisting on covering it, despite Daisy's protests, and said goodbye to Alina with promises to return soon, they stepped back into the night air. The temperature had dropped, and Daisy shivered slightly in her light dress. Without a word, Nick shrugged out of his blazer and draped it over her shoulders. The fabric was warm from his body and carried his scent. "Thank you," Daisy said, pulling it closer around her. "For dinner, for introducing me to Alina, for everything." Nick smiled, reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "The night doesn't have to end yet, you know. There's something else I'd like to show you if you're up for it." The touch of his hand, the warmth in his eyes, the promise of extending their time together, Daisy couldn't have said no if she tried. "Lead the way." Back on the motorcycle, they headed downtown, the city a glittering landscape around them. This time, Daisy relaxed more fully against Nick's back, her arms wrapped comfortably around his waist. There was something intoxicating about the combination of safety and risk being securely held while moving at speed through the night. They crossed into Lower Manhattan, the streets becoming more familiar to Daisy. When Nick finally pulled to a stop, they were in front of the Harrison building, the very structure he was restoring. "A little after hours tour?" Daisy asked, excitement bubbling up. She'd studied this building extensively, but had never been inside. Nick grinned. "I thought you might appreciate seeing it up close, given your academic interest." He led her to a side entrance where a security guard nodded in recognition and unlocked the door for them. "Evening, Mr. Sullivan." "Thanks, Joe. Just showing Miss Mitchell some of the restoration work. We won't be long." Inside, the building was a fascinating mix of construction equipment and covered antique fixtures. Nick guided Daisy through the lobby, pointing out original mosaic floors they'd uncovered beneath layers of cheap tile, marble columns that had been hidden behind drywall for decades, and ornate ceiling medallions currently being restored by master craftsmen. "This is incredible," Daisy marveled, her curator's eye appreciating both the historical elements and the painstaking work being done to preserve them. You're not just restoring it, you're revealing its original beauty. That's exactly our approach, Nick said, clearly pleased by her understanding. We're not imposing our vision, we're uncovering the architect's original intent. He led her to a service elevator, inserting a key to override the normal controls. Ready for the real surprise, Daisy nodded, curious. The elevator climbed smoothly to the top floor, and when the doors opened, they stepped out onto what appeared to be a half-finished office space. Nick led her through it to a door marked Roof Access, Authorized Personnel Only. Are we authorized personnel? Daisy asked with a raised eyebrow. Nick winked. I own the company doing the restoration. I'd say that makes us pretty authorized. He pushed open the door, revealing a spiral staircase that led upward. At the top, he unlocked another door, then stood back to let Daisy through first. She stepped out onto the roof and gasped. The view was spectacular: Manhattan spread out in all directions, a tapestry of lights against the dark sky. But even more impressive were the gargoyles and architectural details that lined the roof's edge, illuminated by carefully placed spotlights. The gargoyles you mentioned in your thesis, Nick said softly, coming to stand beside her. I had the lighting installed last week. No one else has seen them like this yet. Daisy moved closer to the edge, marveling at the intricately carved stone figures. Each had distinct features and expressions, from grimacing demons to solemn angels. They're even more magnificent than I imagined from the historical photographs. We found something interesting during the restoration, Nick said, leading her to a particular gargoyle, a winged figure with a surprisingly gentle expression. Look at the base. Daisy knelt to examine it, finding a small inscription carved into the stone. EH for CH, Eternal Guardian. The architect, Edward Harrison, included this as a tribute to his wife, Charlotte, Nick explained. None of the historical records mentioned it. It was completely hidden by decades of grime and pollution until our cleaning process revealed it. A secret message of love, hidden in plain sight for over a century, Daisy murmured, touched by the discovery. That's beautiful. Nick's hand found hers, fingers intertwining. I thought you'd appreciate that detail. They stood in companionable silence, taking in the panoramic view of the city. The night was clear, with just enough breeze to rustle Daisy's hair. She was acutely aware of Nick beside her, of the warmth of his hand holding hers, of the strange sense that she'd known him much longer than 2 days. Nick, she said finally, turning to face him. What are we doing? His expression grew serious. Right now, we're standing on a historic rooftop, admiring some truly exceptional early 20th century stone carving. You know what I mean. Nick's thumb traced a gentle pattern on the back of her hand. I know, and honestly, I'm not entirely sure. All I know is that I've never felt this kind of immediate connection with someone before. It's a little terrifying. Only a little, Daisy asked with a small smile. Okay, moderately terrifying, he amended, returning her smile, but in the best possible way. It's fast, Daisy said, voicing her main concern. Really fast. It is, Nick agreed. But sometimes the timing isn't up to us. Sometimes life just happens. His free hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing along her cheekbone. I'd like to see where this goes, Daisy. No pressure, no expectations, just exploration. The honesty in his voice, the sincerity in his eyes, Daisy felt something shift inside her, a wall beginning to crumble. I'd like that too, she whispered. Nick leaned down, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that started gentle but quickly deepened. Daisy's arms wound around his neck, pulling him closer as the kiss intensified. There was hunger there, yes, but also something more profound, a recognition, a homecoming. When they finally broke apart, Both slightly breathless, Nick rested his forehead against hers. "I should probably get you home before I completely lose my gentleman status." Daisy laughed softly, her heart racing. Probably a good idea. The ride back to her apartment was charged with a new awareness. Daisy's body pressed against Nick's back, her arms around his waist. Every bump in the road, every turn that required her to hold tighter, each sensation was heightened by the promise of what might come. When they arrived at her building, Nick walked her to the door, his hand never leaving hers. "Thank you for tonight," Daisy said, reluctant for the evening to end despite the lateness of the hour. "It was perfect." "Even better than last night?" Nick asked with a teasing smile. "Even better," she confirmed. "Though that sets a pretty high bar for date number 3. Nick's smile widened. "Is that a challenge, Miss Mitchell?" "Maybe," Daisy replied, enjoying the playfulness between them. "When might this hypothetical third date occur? How's tomorrow?" Too eager. The vulnerability in the question made Daisy's heart squeeze. "Tomorrow sounds perfect," she said. "But it's my turn to plan." Nick's eyes lit up. "I'm intrigued. Any hints?" "None whatsoever," Daisy said with mock sternness. "You'll just have to trust me." "I do," Nick said simply, the words carrying more weight than their casual context suggested. He leaned down for one more kiss, this one brief but full of promise. "Good night, Daisy." "Good night, Nick." As she watched him walk back to his motorcycle, Daisy felt a curious mixture of excitement and serenity. 2 days ago, she'd been dreading a blind date arranged by her meddling brother. Now she was eagerly planning a third date with a man who made her feel more alive than she had in years. Life really did have the most unexpected timing. The next morning, Daisy woke early, her mind already buzzing with plans for their date. She wanted to create something special, something that would show Nick she was as invested in this burgeoning relationship as he was. After a quick shower and coffee, she dialed a number she rarely used. "Hello, Mrs. Abernathy. It's Daisy Mitchell. I was wondering if your offer was still open." Hours later, Daisy sent Nick a text. "Meet me at the Met at 2 p.m., East Entrance, casual dress code." His response came quickly. "Intriguing. Should I bring anything, just your curiosity?" she replied. At precisely 2 p.m., Daisy spotted Nick approaching the museum steps, looking casually handsome in dark jeans and a light blue button-down with the sleeves rolled up. He scanned the crowd until his eyes found her, his face immediately lighting up with a smile that made her heart flutter. "Well, this is a surprise," he said as he reached her, leaning in for a quick kiss. "Are you giving me a private tour of your professional domain?" Daisy smiled mysteriously. "Something like that. Come on." Instead of heading to the main entrance, she led him around the side of the building to a staff entrance. Swiping her ID card, she guided him through a series of corridors rarely seen by the public. "I feel like I'm getting a backstage pass to one of the world's greatest museums," Nick commented, looking around with interest at the administrative offices and conservation workspaces they passed. "That's exactly what's happening," Daisy confirmed. She stopped at a nondescript door, knocked twice, and was greeted by an elderly woman with a shock of white hair and bright blue eyes. "Right on time, my dear," the woman said, her British accent crisp and precise. "And this must be the young man you mentioned." "Nick Sullivan. This is Dr. Margaret Abernathy, the Met's senior curator emeritus and my former mentor," Daisy introduced them. Nick shook the offered hand. "It's an honor to meet you, Dr. Abernathy." "Margaret, please," she corrected with a warm smile. "Any friend of Daisy's is a friend of mine. Especially one who appreciates history as much as you do, from what I've been told." She ushered them into what appeared to be a private conservation laboratory. Tables lined the walls, covered with artifacts in various states of examination and restoration. In the center of the room stood a large crate, still sealed. "What you're about to see," Margaret said, her tone becoming more formal, "is not yet public knowledge. The Met has recently acquired a previously unknown Botticelli sketch that was discovered in a private collection in Switzerland." Daisy mentioned you have an interest in Renaissance art. Nick's eyes widened, looking from Margaret to Daisy with astonishment. "Are you serious? A new Botticelli?" Daisy couldn't contain her smile at his reaction. "We're quite certain of its authenticity. The provenance has been verified, and the stylistic elements are consistent with his early work. We're planning a special exhibition for next spring, but for now, only a handful of people have seen it. And you're allowing me to be one of them?" Nick asked, clearly understanding the significance of this privilege. Margaret nodded. "Daisy has vouched for your discretion, and as someone who works in historical restoration, I trust you appreciate the importance of careful handling and confidentiality." "Absolutely," Nick assured her. With careful movements, Margaret unlocked and opened the crate, revealing a protective case inside. Using gloved hands, she extracted a framed sketch showing a young woman with flowing hair, her expression serene as she gazed at something beyond the frame. "Preliminary study for the birth of Venus," Margaret explained. "You can see how he was working out the facial expression, the tilt of the head. Notice the pentimenti here and here, where he adjusted the line of the jaw and the placement of the eyes." Nick stepped closer, his expression one of reverent awe. "It's extraordinary," he murmured. You can almost see his thought process, the way he was searching for that perfect expression of innocent wonder. Daisy watched him, touched by his genuine appreciation. This wasn't just polite interest, he truly understood what he was looking at. "I'll leave you two to examine it," Margaret said with a knowing smile at Daisy. "I have some paperwork to finish. Take your time, but remember, no touching without gloves." After she left, Nick turned to Daisy, his eyes shining. "This is incredible. I can't believe you arranged this." "I wanted to share something special with you," Daisy said simply. "Something few people get to experience." Nick's expression softened. "Thank you, truly." They spent the next hour examining the sketch in detail, Daisy pointing out technical elements and sharing what art historians knew about Botticelli's methods and materials. Nick asked thoughtful questions and offered insights from a restoration perspective that Daisy found fascinating. "You know," he said at one point, "this reminds me of some of the techniques we've seen in preserving historical murals. The way he builds up the lines, testing different positions before committing, it's like watching someone think on paper." "Exactly," Daisy agreed, pleased by his observation. "That's what makes sketches so intimate and revealing. They're not meant for public display. They're the artist working through problems, having a conversation with themselves." When Margaret returned, they reluctantly said goodbye to the sketch. After thanking her profusely, they continued their private tour, with Daisy showing Nick some of her favorite pieces in the museum, including several that were currently in storage and not on public display. "I never realized how much of the collection isn't actually visible to visitors," Nick commented as they examined a series of ornate Renaissance jewelry pieces. "Less than 10% of the Met's holdings are on display at any given time," Daisy explained. "Space constraints, conservation concerns, rotation schedules, there are lots of reasons. It's like an iceberg, what people see is just the tip." "Similar to buildings in a way," Nick mused. "Most people only see the surface, never thinking about the complex systems and structures hidden behind the walls." Daisy nodded. "Exactly. Both require specialists who can see beyond the obvious and understand the hidden stories." As they moved through the quiet storage areas and conservation spaces, Daisy found herself watching Nick as much as she was watching the art. There was something deeply appealing about sharing her professional world with someone who genuinely appreciated it, who asked intelligent questions and made connections she hadn't considered. Eventually, they emerged into the public galleries, rejoining the steady stream of visitors. "One more stop," Daisy said, leading him through the European painting sections until they reached a small, easily overlooked Botticelli Madonna. "This is it," she said softly. "The painting I told you about last night, my favorite piece in the collection." Nick studied it carefully, taking in the delicate brushwork, the luminous colors, the tender expression on the Madonna's face as she gazed at the child in her arms. "It's not as famous as his larger works," Daisy continued, "but there's something about her expression that's always moved me. It's so human, so full of love and worry at the same time, like she knows what's coming but cherishes this moment of peace." Nick's hand found hers, fingers intertwining. "Thank you for sharing this with me," he said quietly. "Not just the painting, but all of it, your world, your passion." Daisy squeezed his hand, feeling a surge of emotion she couldn't quite name. "Thank you for seeing it the way I do." They stood there in comfortable silence, hands linked, surrounded by centuries of art and the quiet murmur of museum visitors. It felt significant somehow, this moment of connection amid so much history. "Hungry?" Daisy asked eventually, reluctant to break the spell but aware of the time. Nick smiled. "Starving, actually." "Good, because part 2 of our date involves food." They made their way out of the museum and into the late afternoon sunshine. Daisy led them across Central Park to a secluded spot near the lake where, to Nick's surprise, a picnic blanket was already set up, complete with a wicker basket and a bottle of wine chilling in a small cooler. "You planned all this?" Nick asked, clearly impressed. "I called in a favor from a friend who works for a catering company," Daisy explained, kneeling to open the basket. "I wanted something more personal than a restaurant for our third date." The basket revealed an array of gourmet treats, crusty bread, artisanal cheeses, prosciutto, olives, fresh berries, and chocolate truffles. Nick poured the wine while Daisy arranged the food on plates. "To unexpected connections," Nick toasted, raising his glass. "To seeing beneath the surface," Daisy returned, clinking her glass against his. As they ate, their conversation flowed from art to architecture, from family stories to future dreams. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the park, and a street musician's saxophone drifted faintly from somewhere nearby. "This reminds me of our dance in the park," Nick commented, stretching out on his side, propped up on one elbow. "Though with much better food." Daisy laughed, popping a grape into her mouth. "I still can't believe I danced with you in Washington Square Park on our first date. I'm not usually that spontaneous." "I bring out your wild side," Nick teased, reaching over to brush a strand of hair from her face. The casual touch sent a shiver through Daisy. "Maybe you do," she admitted. "It's a little alarming how comfortable I feel with you after just 3 days." Nick's expression grew more serious. "I know. I keep waiting for it to feel strange or too fast, but it just doesn't." "Nathan's going to be insufferable about this," Daisy groaned, though her smile belied her complaint. "He'll never let me forget that his matchmaking worked." "We could always pretend we can't stand each other," Nick suggested with a mischievous grin. "Make him think his plan failed miserably." Daisy laughed at the thought. Tempting, but he'd never believe it, not after he saw us together. "Has he seen us together?" "Not yet, but he's been texting me constantly for updates. It's only a matter of time before he engineers an accidental meeting." Nick reached for her hand, tracing gentle patterns on her palm. "Would that be so terrible, the 3 of us spending time together?" The question held more significance than its casual phrasing suggested. Daisy considered it carefully. "No," she said finally, Not terrible at all, just different. I'm used to keeping my dating life separate from my family life. Because of what happened with Tom? Nick asked gently. Daisy tensed slightly at the mention of her ex-fiancé. Partly. Nathan never liked him, which made family gatherings awkward. When Tom left, Nathan was so obviously relieved that it almost hurt more than the breakup itself. Nick's expression was thoughtful. Nathan cares about you. He wants you to be happy. I know, Daisy sighed, but sometimes his protective big brother routine is a bit much. Which is why it's so surprising that he set us up. He's usually trying to scare men away from me, not introducing them. Maybe he sees something in me that he trusts, Nick suggested. Or maybe he's finally realized that you're perfectly capable of making your own decisions. Unlikely, Daisy said with a small laugh. But I appreciate the optimism. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in dramatic oranges and pinks, they packed up their picnic and strolled hand in hand through the park. The evening had turned cool and Nick draped his arm around Daisy's shoulders, drawing her close against his side. What happens now? Daisy asked quietly, voicing the question that had been hovering between them all day. Nick stopped walking, turning to face her. What would you like to happen? The directness of his question caught Daisy off guard. I'm not sure. Everything is moving so quickly. Part of me wants to slow down, be cautious. But another part, Nick prompted gently when she trailed off. Daisy met his gaze, deciding on honesty. Another part of me wants to keep seeing you every day, to talk until dawn, to find out everything about you, to see if this connection is as real as it feels. Nick's smile was slow and warm, lighting his eyes from within. I vote for option 2. Of course you do, Daisy said, returning his smile despite her attempt to sound stern. But seriously, Nick, we should probably take things slow, right? Be sensible adults about this. Probably, he agreed, though his eyes told a different story as they dropped briefly to her lips. Though I should warn you, I've never been particularly good at sensible when it comes to things I really want. The intensity in his voice sent a shiver through Daisy that had nothing to do with the cool evening air. And what is it you want, Nick Sullivan? Instead of answering with words, Nick drew her closer, one hand sliding into her hair as his lips found hers. Unlike their previous kisses, this one held nothing back. It was deep and passionate from the start, communicating desire and need more eloquently than words could have. Daisy responded in kind, her arms winding around his neck as she pressed against him, all thoughts of caution temporarily forgotten. There was something intoxicating about the way he kissed her, as if she were both precious and essential. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Nick rested his forehead against hers. I want you, he said simply. All of you. Not just for tonight or tomorrow, but for as long as you'll have me. I know it's fast, probably insane, but I've never been more certain of anything. The raw honesty in his voice made Daisy's heart race. Nick, you don't have to say anything, he assured her quickly. I'm not expecting declarations or promises. I just wanted you to know where I stand. Daisy took a deep breath, gathering her courage. I feel it too, she admitted. This connection, it's unlike anything I've experienced before. It terrifies me and thrills me at the same time. Nick's smile was radiant. Then we're terrified together. That's something, right? It's definitely something, Daisy agreed with a small laugh. They resumed walking, hands entwined, each lost in thought as the park lights began to illuminate the gathering dusk. When they reached the edge of the park, Nick turned to her. Would you like to come back to my place? For coffee or a nightcap? He asked, then quickly added, no pressure, just… I'm not ready for tonight to end yet. Daisy hesitated only briefly. I'd like that. Nick's apartment was in Tribeca, in a converted industrial building that retained much of its original character: exposed brick walls, soaring ceilings, massive windows. But what immediately struck Daisy was how personal the space felt. Unlike many high-end New York apartments that seemed designed to impress rather than comfort, Nick's home was clearly lived in and loved. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with volumes on architecture, art, history, and literature. A well-worn leather couch faced a fireplace that had been retrofitted into what was once a freight elevator shaft. The kitchen was open and practical, with hanging copper pots and a butcher block island that showed signs of actual use. Most striking were the artifacts and art pieces thoughtfully displayed throughout the space. What appeared to be an ancient stone carving on a pedestal framed architectural drawings, a collection of antique tools arranged like a sculpture. "This is beautiful," Daisy said, moving to examine a particularly interesting painting that seemed to depict a historical building site. "Thank you," Nick replied, watching her with a pleased expression. "It's taken years to get it just right. Coffee, wine, or something stronger?" "Wine would be nice," Daisy decided, continuing her exploration of his space. She stopped at a wall of photographs Nick on various job sites, at what appeared to be the opening of a restored theater, standing beside a much younger Nathan at what looked like a graduation ceremony. "That was the day we met," Nick said, coming up behind her with 2 glasses of red wine. "Nathan's company had just saved our Boston project, and he came to the ribbon-cutting ceremony." "You both look so uncomfortable," Daisy observed, accepting the wine with a smile of thanks. Nick laughed. "We were. The photographer insisted on a picture of the Sullivan brothers, and neither of us knew quite how to stand or what to say to each other. It was painfully awkward. And now he's one of my closest friends," Nick said simply. "It took time, but we found our way to being brothers in more than just name." Daisy sipped her wine, oddly moved by this insight. "That's nice to hear. Nathan doesn't let many people get close to him." "Something you have in common," Nick observed gently. Daisy glanced at him sharply. "What makes you say that?" Nick shrugged, moving to sit on the couch and gesturing for her to join him. "Just an observation. You both have these careful boundaries around yourselves, different strategies but similar purpose." Daisy settled beside him, curling her legs underneath her. "And what strategy do I use, according to your analysis?" "Intellectual engagement," Nick said without hesitation. "You're warm and open when discussing art, history, ideas, but more reserved with personal matters. You deflect with intelligence." "That's—" Daisy paused, realizing he had pegged her exactly. "Uncomfortably accurate." Nick smiled, reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. "I notice things. Occupational hazard of restoration work. You have to see what's beneath the surface." "And what do you see beneath my surface?" Daisy asked, surprising herself with her boldness. Nick studied her face, his expression growing serious. "Someone who's been hurt but hasn't let it make her bitter. Someone passionate and brilliant who sometimes holds back from fully experiencing life, because books and art are safer than people. Someone afraid of connection but brave enough to try anyway." The accuracy of his assessment left Daisy momentarily speechless. "How do you do that?" she finally asked. "See so clearly into someone you've just met." "Maybe it's not about how long we've known each other," Nick suggested, his voice soft. "Maybe some people just fit together in a way that transcends time." His words resonated somewhere deep inside her, touching on feelings Daisy had barely acknowledged to herself. She set her wine glass down on the coffee table and turned to face him fully. "Nick," she said quietly, "I should probably go home." His expression remained open, accepting. "If that's what you want." "It's not what I want," she admitted. But it's probably what I should do if we're taking things slow. Nick set his own glass aside and took her hands in his. Daisy, we can move at whatever pace feels right to you. There's no rulebook here, just us, figuring this out together. The sincerity in his voice, the patience in his expression, something shifted inside Daisy, a barrier crumbling away. With sudden clarity, she realized she was tired of caution, tired of holding herself apart from life. Maybe I'm tired of being sensible, she said, moving closer to him. Maybe I want to follow this feeling wherever it leads. Nick's eyes darkened as he understood her meaning. Are you sure? In response, Daisy leaned forward and kissed him, a kiss that left no doubt about her intentions. Nick responded immediately, pulling her closer until she was practically in his lap, his hands tangling in her hair as the kiss deepened. What followed was a revelation, a connection that went beyond the physical, though the physical was breathtaking in its intensity. There was a sense of recognition in every touch, every shared breath, every whispered word of encouragement or pleasure. It wasn't just desire. It was discovery of each other, of themselves, of possibilities neither had anticipated. Later, wrapped in Nick's sheets and the warmth of his arms, Daisy felt a contentment she hadn't experienced in years, maybe ever. There was none of the awkwardness she might have expected after such rapid intimacy. Instead, there was a peaceful certainty, a sense of rightness. "What are you thinking?" Nick asked softly, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. Daisy smiled, nestling closer to him. "That I've never been so glad my brother is a meddling matchmaker." Nick's laugh rumbled through his chest beneath her cheek. "Remind me to send him a very expensive thank you gift." "Don't you dare," Daisy warned. "His ego is already the size of Manhattan." They fell into comfortable silence, the city lights casting patterns on the ceiling above them. Daisy felt herself drifting toward sleep, more relaxed and at peace than she could remember being in a long time. "Daisy," Nick's voice was quiet in the darkness. I'm falling in love with you," he said simply. "I know it's fast, probably crazy, but I wanted you to know." Daisy's heart swelled with emotion. Instead of the panic she might have expected at such a declaration, she felt only warmth and certainty. "I'm falling in love with you too," she whispered back. "And yes, it's fast and probably crazy, but it feels right." Nick's arms tightened around her and she felt him press a kiss to the top of her head. "Stay," he murmured. "Not just tonight. Stay for breakfast, for lunch, for as long as you want." Daisy smiled in the darkness. "That might be a very long time." "I'm counting on it," Nick replied. As Daisy drifted off to sleep in the arms of a man she'd known for just 3 days, a man who somehow felt more right than anyone she'd ever met, her last coherent thought was that sometimes the most unexpected connections turned out to be the most profound. And sometimes falling in love happened before the drinks even arrived. 3 months later, Daisy stood in the grand ballroom of the newly restored Harrison Building, surveying the crowd of New York's elite who had gathered for the official reopening gala. As the curator of a special exhibition of architectural drawings and historical photographs displayed throughout the building, she had a professional reason to be there. But her eyes kept straying to the tall figure moving confidently among the guests, occasionally catching her gaze and sending her a private smile. "You're staring," Nathan commented, appearing at her side with 2 champagne flutes. He handed one to her, his expression amused. "It's almost embarrassing how obvious you two are." Daisy accepted the champagne with a smile. "Says the man who engineered this whole situation. Shouldn't you be gloating about your successful matchmaking?" "Oh, I am," Nathan assured her. "Just internally. External gloating would be gauche." Daisy laughed, nudging her brother with her shoulder. "Thank you," she said more seriously, for introducing us, for seeing what I couldn't have known to look for." Nathan's expression softened. "You're happy, that's all I wanted." "I am," Daisy confirmed, her eyes finding Nick again as he chatted with the mayor. "Ridiculously, unexpectedly happy." "And moving in together after only 3 months isn't too fast?" Nathan asked, though his tone held no judgment. Daisy considered the question. In the weeks since that first night at Nick's apartment, she had spent progressively more time there, until maintaining her own place seemed a needless formality. The decision to officially move in together had come naturally, without angst or uncertainty. "It would be for most people, probably," she acknowledged. "But with Nick, it's different. It's like we've been moving toward each other our whole lives, and now that we've found each other, there's no reason to delay." Nathan studied her for a moment, then nodded. "I get that. Sometimes when something's right, it's just right." Before Daisy could respond, Nick appeared at her side, slipping an arm around her waist. "The mayor is thoroughly impressed with your exhibition," he told her. "He particularly liked how you integrated the architectural drawings with the contemporary photographs of the restoration process." "High praise indeed," Daisy said, leaning into him slightly. "Well deserved," Nathan added. "The exhibition is brilliant, Daisy." "It was a true collaboration," she said, smiling up at Nick. "I had an inside source for all the best restoration details." "Speaking of inside sources," Nick said, his tone casual though Daisy detected a hint of nervousness. "There's something I'd like to show both of you before the main presentation begins." He led them away from the crowded ballroom, down a corridor, and into an elevator. Nick inserted a key into a special slot, and the elevator began to rise. "Where are we going?" Nathan asked. "You'll see," Nick replied cryptically. When the elevator doors opened, they were on the top floor. Nick guided them through to the roof access staircase that Daisy remembered from their second date. "The gargoyles again?" she asked, intrigued. "Something like that," Nick said with a smile that didn't quite hide his nervousness. The rooftop had been transformed since Daisy had last seen it. Strings of lights illuminated the space, and a small table had been set with champagne and 3 glasses. But what immediately caught Daisy's attention was a new addition among the historical gargoyles, a smaller stone carving on a pedestal. "What's this?" she asked, moving closer to examine it. The carving was of 2 figures embracing, their features stylized but with enough detail to be recognizable as a man and woman. At the base was an inscription, "NS and DM, Eternal Guardians." Daisy's breath caught as she realized the significance. "Nick." He came to stand beside her, taking her hand. "I commissioned it as part of the restoration, a modern addition among the historical pieces, inspired by Edward Harrison's tribute to his wife." "It's beautiful," Daisy whispered, touching the smooth stone surface with her free hand. "There's more," Nick said softly. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Nathan, who had been watching silently, suddenly cleared his throat. "Should I give you 2 a moment alone?" "No," Nick said, surprising both siblings. "I wanted you here, Nathan. You brought us together. You're part of this story." He turned back to Daisy, who was staring at the box with wide eyes. "I know it's fast," he began, echoing a theme that had been present since their first meeting. "But some things in life don't follow conventional timelines. Some connections are so profound, so immediate, that questioning them feels like questioning the sun rising or the stars shining." Nick opened the box, revealing a vintage ring with an emerald surrounded by small diamonds. "This was my mother's. She told me once that when she met my father, she knew within days that he was the one, despite all the complications their relationship would face. She never regretted a moment of their time together, brief as it was." He took a deep breath. "Daisy Mitchell, I've known you for exactly 93 days, and I'm more certain about you than I've ever been about anything in my life. Will you marry me?" Daisy felt tears welling in her eyes, but they were tears of joy. There was no hesitation, no doubt, just a bone-deep certainty that this was right. "Yes," she said simply. "Absolutely yes." Nick's face broke into a radiant smile as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, the emerald catching the light from the strings of bulbs overhead. He pulled her into a kiss that was both tender and passionate, a promise of all that was to come. When they separated, Nathan was waiting with the champagne already poured. "To my sister and my brother," he toasted, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "May your lives together be as extraordinary as your beginning." They clinked glasses, the three of them forming a new kind of family unit under the watchful eyes of the gargoyles and the glow of the city lights. Later, as they rejoined the gala, Daisy found herself continually glancing at the ring on her finger, still amazed by the turn her life had taken in just 3 months. What had begun as a dreaded blind date had transformed into the greatest adventure of her life. "Happy," Nick murmured in her ear as they circulated among the guests. "Deliriously," Daisy confirmed, squeezing his hand. "Though I still can't believe I fell in love with my brother's half-brother." Nick laughed. "Just think of the story we'll tell our children someday. Your mother was so captivated by me that she fell in love before the drinks even arrived." "Is that how you remember it?" Daisy teased. "Because I recall being highly skeptical." "For all of 5 minutes," Nick countered with a grin. "Then my charm wore you down." "Your humility is truly your most attractive quality," Daisy said dryly, though her eyes sparkled with amusement. As they shared a private laugh amid the swirl of the gala, Daisy felt a profound sense of gratitude for Nathan's meddling, for Nick's persistence, and for her own willingness to take a chance on something that defied conventional timing. Sometimes, she reflected, the most meaningful connections happened in an instant recognition rather than discovery, like finding a piece of yourself you hadn't known was missing until it was suddenly, perfectly in place. And sometimes, against all odds and expectations, you fell in love before the drinks even arrived.